Tim.
I'm Chris.
I'm Sarah.
And welcome to CinemaSpection. Tonight we're going to be talking about the Black Bird. That's right, we're discussing the Maltese Falcon.
Come closer. I want to talk to you. I'm going to tell you an astounding story. The story of the Maltese Falcon. 600 years the falcon has carried the mystery of a fabulous wealth under its grotesque wings. I could tell you 1,000 tales of the men and women who have hunted this evil bird. But every story has the same ending. Murder. Listen to these incredible people, all consumed by their passionate greed for the Maltese Falcon.
What have you ever given me beside money? Have you ever given me any of your confidence, any of the truth? Haven't you tried to buy my loyalty with money and nothing else?
What else is there I can buy you with?
We were talking about a lot more money than this.
There are more of us to be taken care of now.
Well, that may be, but I've got the Falcon.
You may have the Falcon, but we certainly have you.
That was a little bit from the trailer for the movie. Here's a quick plot synopsis. For private detective Sam Spade, the murder of his partner Miles Archer is just the beginning of his troubles. With the police looking to pin the crime on him, Spade's best shot at clearing his name lies with Bridget O'Shaughnessy, a beautiful but duplicitous client who draws him into the hunt for a legendary treasure, a jeweled figurine known as the Maltese Falcon. Unfortunately, there are other players in the game, including dapper thug Joel Cairo and erudite felon Casper Gutman. Spade struggles to keep one step ahead of both cops and criminals to get his hands on the bird first. Since this is quite an old movie, dating back to 1941, we are going to be spoiling the hell out of this, so it's probably advisable you see the movie before you listen to this.
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert!
Okay, so guys, this was actually your first time watching the movie. What'd you guys think?
I thought it was fantastic. Especially recently, watching Casablanca with much of the same cast, just going into this one right after. It's an awesome, I wouldn't necessarily say improvement, just a different direction for everybody. It was fantastic. Really enjoyed it.
I really liked it. I think it's interesting to see movies from back that far and how different society is now from then.
Yeah, everybody dressed a lot snappier, that's for certain.
Everyone sounded a lot more intelligent.
And it's another thing that I found interesting, we'll get into this more as we go, but it's always good to see everything isn't one note. You've got your male characters that are all very, they kind of have that chauvinistic, above the women characters, even in Humphrey Bogart's character there in Sam Spade. But yet all the women he seems to surround himself with are at least stronger, if not, as into it as he is. There's always a cab waiting somewhere, and while he expects it, they're all just kind of there and not necessarily pawns, but almost in the same step or even a step ahead of him at times, and it's very interesting.
Yeah, all the women are clever and kind of playing their own games with him and pulling their own little tricks. All right, well, a couple of facts about the movie. It's based on the book by Dashiell Hammett, originally serialized in Black Mask magazine back in 1929. Hammett was actually a real detective himself for the Pinkerton Detective Agency, and a lot of the situations and characters in his books came from people he actually encountered, although he says Sam Spade himself was a complete fiction, kind of the dream detective that every private eye imagines they want.
I'd like to meet the people Peter Lorre in any of these movies or stories was supposed to be.
I'd be a little nervous, too, to be honest with you.
Yeah, being in a dark room or alley alone with this character, at least if you slap him around a couple of times, he seems to subdue him.
Well, he's expected to like it.
He's expected to like it.
The actor that played Gutman was kind of frightening in the trailer.
Well, you're on his good side. He's Joel to, have a cigar with, have a drink, or maybe not have a drink as it turns out, and just chat about history. The movie was the first film written and directed by John Huston. It was filmed on a budget of $375,000, pretty tight budget even for the time, and was a huge hit both commercially and critically. It was released on October 3rd, 1941, and nominated for 3 Oscars for Best Picture, Best Adapted Screenplay, and Best Supporting Actor for Sidney Greenstreet. And boy, did he deserve it.
Did he win?
No, unfortunately he didn't. I'm not sure who he lost to, but he did
they get
win.
any of them?
I don't believe they got any for this one yet, although Huston would get some down the road. This is actually, interestingly, the third version of the book to make it to the movies. It was filmed first in 1931 as The Maltese Falcon, and then as Satan Met a Lady in 1936 with Bette Davis. Both versions were flops and pretty much reviled by the critics, so everyone's like, oh, they're rebooting a series or remaking something after 5 or 6 years, and it was only 5 years between each of the 3 different versions of the movie.
Oh boy.
It took them the third time to get it right. Yeah.
Third time's the charm.
No, that's an interesting title, Satan Met a Lady. Having never heard, I didn't even know there was more than one version of this before you just mentioned it. So who do you think they're referring to there? I think we're referring to was it the Thurston or is it Thursby character with Bridget or...
Well, Well, I'm assuming Satan actually meant Spade, because in the book, that's his description, is he's basically described as a blonde Satan.
Interesting. Because he's played off as more, I wouldn't say necessarily a great human being in this one, but definitely the character, he's definitely the one being screwed over more than, say, Bridget. Bridget seems to have, even if it wasn't by design, got herself in a lot of trouble and learned how to be a little too clever for her own good, it would almost seem.
But still, there's kind of a ruthlessness to him.
Oh, of course. He kind of seems to enjoy it a little bit.
Yeah, and it's at the same time, normally you think that's a horrible quality. Here, you kind of admire it in him.
You kind of admire it. And I'd say him and Gutman there seem to have that same exact... Gutman never seems to, even though, at the end of the day, he got completely screwed, right? Like Spade had the complete drop on him, and by that effect, Bridget for most of the movie. He never seemed rattled by it.
No, they're like players at the same fighting class.
Yeah, it's it's just a game of chess, and eventually, one of us is going to get run through, and we just kind of have to let it happen.
Yeah, and it seems like both of them kind of enjoy the, having to adapt and improvise and try to outthink one another. And
If you start something, I'll make it a matter of your having to kill me. Or call it off.
That's an attitude, sir, that calls for the most delicate judgment on both sides. Because as you know, sir, in the heat of action, men are likely to forget where their best interests lie and let their emotions carry them away.
And the trick from my angle is to make my play strong enough to tie you up, but not make you mad enough to bump me off against your better judgment.
I guess you are a character.
And the gentlemanly way about it. It's at 1 minute we're yelling at each other, throwing glasses, and the next day we see each other, and cigar and scotch again?
Both the characters and the actors play well off each other.
It's unbelievable to watch the characters at play. You've got Spade in a room with 5 people that you find out, after everything plays out, that were completely dispensable to him. He didn't care which one, right? And the order in which he picked, it's like the one that has the most chance of killing me. I'm going to try to dispatch him first and get everybody against him. Yep. I'll go with Cairo next, because Cairo, while flighty, obviously, wouldn't have gotten where he is now if he hadn't, knocked a few people off in the way here. And then you've got Bridget, which at the end of the day was the one he implicated the whole damn time.
Yeah, saving her for last.
It saves her for last to rake over the coals, and it's just so wonderfully played out.
Especially when you consider everybody in that room, once we, find out what's really going on, would pretty much have no problem with killing him.
Exactly.
If it came to it, if they really needed to. All right, why don't we get to the cast individually? First of all, of course, Humphrey Bogart. I mean, you barely have to really go into a lot of who he is, but interesting to note a couple of his earlier collaborations with John Huston, who directed this one. Huston had written The Amazing Dr. Clitterhouse, which Bogart had a villainous part in. Yes, I know, that name kind of...
Sorry, everyone.
Makes you pause, but...
We won't even go with that one. That's like a cunning linguist. It's kind of the same.
He also wrote the script for High Sierra, which was Bogart's big breakthrough film that he did right before this one for director Raoul Walsh. That was the first time he really got to play the lead role, got to play a romantic lead to some degree, but he was still kind of playing gangsters and bad guys, which had been his forte before this movie. Usually in movies with James Cagney where he was the bad guy who'd eventually get shot by the third act. Huston and Bogart would also get together for Across the Pacific, which has a lot of the same cast members as this. Of course, Treasure of the Sierra Madre, which is one of Bogart's best performances, and The African Queen, which he would finally win an Oscar for Best Actor. Much later than it should have come, I'd say. But this is the one that kind of changed Bogart's career. I mean, before this, like I said, he was always a villain. Here, finally, audiences could accept him as a ladies' man, a romantic guy, and this wonderful, clever, cynical, hard-bitten attitude that he has that kind of pervades the rest of his film roles.
And it's a very layered character, too. Like, I mean, in the little asides, you have nowadays cinema kind of has to explain everything to you. Even a movie like this, it's like, it can't just be an aside between him and his secretary that, oh yeah, they've done this 1,000 times before. Mm-hmm. They've got themselves caught up in stuff where they're over their heads, and you just learn as it goes that, he might not just be some bumbling fool getting taken by this lady, And nowadays they'd have to show you something. There'd have to be a flashback or this is going to be just like last time, early in the movie.
Or some kind of James Bond mini-adventure at the beginning.
Exactly. And here just a little clever wink and a little, just the way the sternness of the words or a code word in a phone call or whatever. I mean, even at the end, you've got go to this lockbox and you'll find a note and it's going to tell you to go to that same place that we always use to get this thing, and it's like, wow, it's like that's all you need. Yep. And that subtlety that it's just missing nowadays.
Or other characters, when he talks to the detectives or the cabbie on the street, you always get this sense of, this network of people he's bumped into in previous cases, and that he's gone through this sort of thing a lot of times before and knows what he's doing. A lot of Dashiell Hammett's characters don't really know what the score is. They just jump into a situation, start playing characters against one another, and figure, well, eventually I'll figure it out, and I'll probably come on top by the end. That's pretty much what Spade is doing.
Trust no one.
Yeah, but Bogart just makes it look so cool. He's always completely confident, even when he has no clue what he's doing or who he should trust. He just walks into a room and grabs control of the situation.
Well, there's never once was he like, what did I get myself into? Screw it, and walk away.
And
exactly.
And what was great, speaking right to that, the three of us were talking before we started recording, and there's a particular scene the first time he meets Gutman where he completely flies off the handle.
I'll think again and think fast. I told that gunsel of yours you'd have to talk to me before you're through. I'm telling you now, you'll talk to me today or you are through. What are you wasting my time for? I can get along without you. And another thing, keep that gunsel out of my way while you're making up your mind. I'll kill him if you don't, I'll kill him.
And you realize after, it's all theatrics. It's all, and the movie gives you that one bit to be, shit, maybe this guy really is in over his head. And then the little clever smirk and the handkerchief comes out and he wipes out his side. It almost comes with a, like, you sly devil kind of a thing going into
and he looks down at his hand still shaking. And
which means he knows he could have been friggin' shot. And he's like, I actually get a little scared.
There's a lot of kind of the performer in Spade. Like, a lot of the movie is him pretending to be a lot more corrupt than he actually is so he can, move around these criminals and make side deals with them.
Or even with Bridget, the way he plays himself off with Bridget is not the same guy you see in scenes when she's not there.
Yeah, definitely.
It's almost like Spade himself as an actor.
Oh, definitely. I think that probably have to come up a lot in his profession. I mean, when he first meets her, he has to play the cool, disinterested, he doesn't give up the fact that she pays so much money that he knows that she's lying. He just kind of nods.
So, yep, that's exactly the going rate, man.
Sure, that's just how this works, right on. George Raff was almost cast in this part. He had almost been cast in High Sierra as well, and turned down that one, turned down this one, also turned down All Through the Night, which Bogart took the lead in, and Casablanca. So everything that George Raff basically declined to star in as an actor has benefited Bogart's career.
Wow. And that took him, like you said, right from being kind of the...
Hope that was a thank you note.
The second tier of the criminal brought him into this.
Yeah, from kind of a bit player and supporting actor as, the usual standard heavy into the lead. Next we have Mary Astor as Bridget O'Shaughnessy, who had won a Best Supporting Actress Oscar for The Great Lie, also popped up in Red Dust with Clark Gable, The Palm Beach Story, Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte with Bette Davis, and Act of Violence, this really great film noir with Robert Ryan. In real life, she had a really notorious reputation. She had affairs with John Barrymore and writer George Kaufman. And during one of her divorces, this diary of all of her sexual exploits actually made it into the other legal team's hands, and basically was leaked. A lot of it was leaked to the public, which gave her this aura of scandal around her.
She was a hoa.
And that was
Very
before
nice.
this. So when you're watching this, for audiences watching this movie, that would be in their mind. This bad girl who had this reputation, pretending to be this saintly victim who needs help.
You aren't exactly the sort of a person you pretend to be, are you?
I'm not sure I know exactly what you mean.
The schoolgirl manner, blushing, stammering, and all that.
I haven't lived a good life. I've been bad. Worse than you could know.
That's good, because if you actually were as innocent as you pretend to be, we'd never get anywhere.
I won't be innocent.
Good.
That's interesting to play off. It actually, if you think
Work imitating life.
especially, again, that, you get scandals and things, but, nowadays, you'd put that movie in theaters, and I'm sure then, too, for the people that know it, that might have played into the allure of the role. Because you get this actress who, at the moments in time when she's faking and lying her head back, and it's all just a show, the movie changes the way that it's shot, it changes the way that it's lit, and it almost turns into like a Gone with the Wind kind of a shot where it's like, oh, let's build up the drama, like the movie is kind of taking a nod to you to be like, oh yeah, we know she's bullshitting right now.
Yeah, she plays it, she intentionally overplays it with just the right touch of melodrama whenever she's trying to play on Spade's sympathies.
The shooting and the lighting and everything goes with her, and I think that's a cool way the movie, it almost has, I wouldn't call it breaking the fourth wall necessarily, but it just goes enough with her for you to kind of be like, oh, is she really putting us on? We don't know yet, and it's very cool.
But then you see her with her little, meeting with Cairo, and her attitude changes. She's down to business and very shifty, and immediately we're like, oh, okay, we see the other layer behind this. And the sense that she's done this to a whole ton of guys.
And she's no better than any of the people chasing her.
Nope, she just uses a different kind of skill set to try and manipulate people, rather than just threatening people with violence.
I don't even think she knows what to believe that comes out of her mouth.
And
Quite
she
possibly by the
she
end,
even
yeah.
alluded to that, and that's one of the only times she sounded honest.
Mhm.
Yes, when she was like,
like I don't even know what the truth is anymore.
Yeah.
Or just another way of saying, I'm not going to tell you right now. I'm not in the mood.
I have a headache.
Which is interesting considering what she plied him off with in that scene, or at least what's implied she plied him
I just
off
find
with
it interesting.
instead.
By the end of the movie, they were like, "We love each other."
But
Where the hell did that come from?
Well, and that's him playing into it even more. It's like, I want to freaking knock you down even further.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I'm going to keep you guessing. Am I in love with you?
Like
Did it work?
where
Did
that-
you
like,
really play me?
If they hadn't mentioned it, I wouldn't have even thought that they were really in a relationship. I would have thought they were just kind of pretending.
I get the sense he really did have feelings for her by that point, but he wasn't going to let those take over.
Well, speaking of his feelings for her, I mean, geez, you go from one drama queen extent to the next. You've got his partner there's widow, as it were,
Yep.
who just seemed like he was looking for an out on that one long before the partner died.
As soon as he shows up, it's like, oh, this one was much more trouble than she was.
I mean,
worried.
Keep her away from me.
as dark as it is for we're in a week's time, or at least 4 days time.
About a
right?
week, yeah.
And every time she shows up, she's still in her funeral garb. I mean, that's got to tell you something.
And yet her first words for, while she's mourning her husband is, did you kill him?
I just need to know.
It's not going to end, the situation where we'll still, get together, but I just want to know for my own comfort.
If anything, it turns me on. Wait a minute, this movie went in a weird direction.
Okay, yeah. I don't think that's what Houston intended.
Unless it was Peter Lorre.
Yeah, we'll get to him next. But,
Yes.
Geraldine Fitzgerald was almost cast in the role, which will be funny in just a second. I'll get to that. So we have Peter Lorre as Joel Cairo, one of the most imitated actors ever, with that distinctive voice.
Yes.
Ren and Stimpy.
Yep.
Ren and Stimpy, Looney Tunes.
Yep. Among many
Looney
other
Tunes
things.
actually had Peter Lorre
Even-
in
Yeah,
an
episodes.
animated version. And
Even
Bogart
Genie
in
and
the
Aladdin. When you
Yes,
thought you were
yes.
bringing back the dead.
I don't like it.
few. Yep.
Yes, that's what I said to
I don't
Dylan.
like doing it.
He was an Austrian actor, best known as the killer in Fritz Lang's M. He's fantastic in that
Which is probably a good topic of a future podcast,
one.
because that movie is
I definitely hope so.
friggin' phenomenal.
He left Europe when the Nazis came to power, since he was Jewish. He worked with Bogart again in, of course, Casablanca, where he played Ugarte, the guy who steals the letters of transit and gets shot for his trouble. Passage to Marseille, also with Sidney Greenstreet again and Bogart. All Through the Night. He also appeared in Mad Love, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and Arsenic and Old Lace. And you can see the kind of comic ability he used in that one in little bits here. Some of his delivery is just hilarious. His whole first meeting with Spade is just an incredibly sublime bit of comedy.
See, Mr. Spade, I'm trying to recover ornament that, shall we say, has been mislaid.
Uh-huh.
I thought and hoped you could assist me. The ornament is a statuette. Black figure of a bird. I am prepared to pay on behalf of the figure's rightful owner the sum of $5,000 for its recovery. I am prepared to promise that, what is the phrase? No questions will be asked.
Really is. He's fantastic in this. I mean, again, to speak to the things the group here have seen together, I mean, he's fantastic in Casablanca and his little bit part. And, it's interesting to mention, the obsession that people like the Warner Brothers guys there with Looney Tunes had with the guy, television, cartoons, Ren and Stimpy, and we were talking. There's a band, the World Inferno Friendship Society, wrote an entire goddamn album about the guy that has tie-ins to this movie, tie-ins to Casablanca, and everything else. And it's especially for bit roles most of the time. The impact the guy had.
Well,
It's
he's
unbelievable.
just such a distinctive screen presence. And it's interesting in this one where in the book he's very distinctly a gay character. Here they had to, because of the production codes, they had to tone it down a lot. But I think
He got it in there,
Laurie
especially
suggested definitely.
the
In the
crying
period of time, that
and the
was
fluttery
something-
running away when he got offended.
It's when he first shows up in the office and he has the cane and he's doing very suggestive things with
Incredibly
it, putting it near his
suggestive.
mouth. Yeah.
And God, the fact that Sam Spade takes him down the way he obviously would easily take down any woman in the movie by just slapping him repeatedly and telling him he's going to like it. It was pretty over the top, especially for a movie of that time.
Oh, yeah. And after this movie, he actually kind of formed an on-screen team with Sidney Greenstreet. They did 9 movies together, besides the ones mentioned, also Background in Danger, which had George Raft, ironically, And Three Strangers, which had Geraldine Fitzgerald, who I mentioned was almost cast as Bridget O'Shaughnessy, and was originally intended to be a sequel to this movie, but when they realized they didn't have the rights to the characters beyond the original story, they had to change it and rewrite it into something different. And that brings us to Sidney Greenstreet, and amazingly, this was his first movie.
Really?
He was a stage actor before this, and he was absolutely terrified making this movie. He thought he was going to make a fool of himself.
He's terrifying.
He's terrifying, yeah, he's great.
And I mean, especially for an actor of the time of that size, aside from the joke and the name, you know, he's equally as dangerous as anybody, but goes about it differently. He's, you know, as we said earlier, him and Spade are cut from the same exact cloth. You know, while Spade's more, I guess, I wouldn't necessarily say quote-unquote law-abiding, he works within the law when it helps him. He definitely has, you know, the local authorities under his thumb, as it would seem. But there's a you scratch your back, I scratch mine. But, you know, there's definitely that going on. But other than that, you put the two of them in a room together, and it's two guys working the same game. Mm-hmm. And they just enjoy it.
And he's this physically intimidating presence, especially the way the camera is shot low. You know, it's a low angle up at him, so he's looming over the frame, and yet he has this kind of soft-spoken, genteel manner. He just
never raises his voice.
No, he's very calm all the time, never yells or anything. His threatening is a lot more subtle and clever, and you have to kind of read between the lines to get what he's saying, but Spade is with him every minute of it.
He just never seems rattled. Like, nothing seems to rattle him.
Nope.
And he was the perfect, to speak to the trailer we talked about before, the perfect presence to use in that trailer. You know, you're going to sell this movie. They're not selling it with Bogart. They're not selling it with Laurie. They're not selling it with the female lead. You know, they're selling it with this guy in a tux, lit so only the white of the tux in his face is showing in the scene, just describing the Falcon and always looking off camera as if someone's watching him. And it's
commanding you to come
here. Commanding you to come closer.
No, but his character wasn't anything like that.
And that's what's
perfect. His character
perfect.
wasn't very commanding or very creepy. His character was
but in the sense that we sense he does love to talk. When he's he gives the whole history of the Falcon to Spade, who by that point he's already decided to drug. He's not going to need him, but he still wants to get this
like a Bond
out
villain.
Anyway. Yeah. Like Spade, he likes to perform. But it's interesting.
See, I don't even care if you pass out because I'm going to keep talking.
Yeah.
You're a close-mouthed man?
Oh, I like to talk.
Better and better. I distrust a close-mouthed man. He generally picks the wrong time to talk and says the wrong things. Talking something you can't do judiciously unless you keep in practice. Now, sir, we'll talk if you like. I tell you right out, I'm a man who likes talking to a man who likes to talk.
Interesting you mentioned a Bond villain because he did inspire a lot of different characters. One was Cyrus Redblock on the episode The Big Goodbye of Star Trek The Next Generation, played by Lawrence Tierney. Jabba the Hutt was supposedly somewhat based on him.
Wow, I didn't know that.
The large, obese, threatening but kind of very cool-headed gangster. And the Kingpin from Marvel Comics.
That is the most perfect correlation.
Yeah, you take a look at him, you can
it's the same guy.
See it, yep. We also have Gladys George as Iva, Miles Archer's widow. She also appeared in The Best Years of Our Lives, and The Roaring Twenties, also with Bogart, back when he was still just playing straight villains, where she played Panama Smith. Great in that one. And Alicia Cook Jr. as Wilmer. Cook has been, in pretty much everything. I mean, you look at that guy, he's been a supporting actor or bit player in tons and tons of stuff, including The Big Sleep, also Bogart. Where ironically there he played a character that Bogart comes to respect over the course of the film, where he just mercilessly tears him down every chance he has. He was in The Killers, The House on Haunted Hill, the original one, Rosemary's Baby, and as Samuel Cogley in the Star Trek episode Court Martial. He plays this great kind of Luddite defense lawyer. And interestingly, one of his last roles was in the movie Hammett, a biographical movie about Dashiell Hammett.
Oh, fantastic.
Dashiell Hammett, I should say.
Is that the right pronunciation? It's not Dashiell?
It's Dashiell. I know.
Like Dachshund?
You first said it, I'm like,
Dachshund?
Dashiell, but maybe I'm wrong.
That's how I used to say it. I had to check it. It supposedly actually is Dashiell.
Really?
It's a common mispronunciation on that one. Also in the cast, we had some Warner Brothers stock players like Ward Bond as Detective Polhouse. You might recognize him as Bert the Cop from It's a Wonderful Life.
Yep.
And as Captain Clayton in The Searchers. And Barton McLean, who was always playing heavy in these kind of movies, who played the other detective, Dundee. He was also in High Sierra with Bogart, as well as Treasure of Sierra Madre, and had a regular role in I Dream of Jeannie.
Really?
Yeah. That brings us to writer and director John Huston.
What about the secretary lady?
Oh, I actually don't have notes for her. Shoot. Oops.
Oh, I liked her.
She's a really great, capable character. Yeah, she always manages to keep pace with Spade no matter what's going on. Never thrown for a loop. Just like, okay. The only time
She's your typical Hollywood movie secretary.
Yeah, the only time she actually seems a little bit rattles when Captain Jacoby shows up and collapses dead.
Right.
Other than that, she's totally keeps pace. An interesting note, Captain Jacoby in that tiny little cameo is played by Walter Huston, the director's father.
Oh, fantastic.
Who would win an Oscar a couple of years later for Treasure of Sierra Madre with Bogart and his son again. Huston was, up to this point, just a screenwriter and decided after seeing a lot of his scripts mangled by actors who insisted on these crazy changes that he wanted to direct himself. He was formerly a boxer, an artist, and a member of the Mexican cavalry, kind of a real madsman type of adventurer. Besides Treasure of the Sierra Madre, he'd also direct The Asphalt Jungle, The African Queen, Moby Dick, and The Man Who Would Be King. He was also an actor, starred in Chinatown, had a really distinctive and creepy part in that one, and provided the voice of Gandalf in the animated versions of The Hobbit and Return of the King, which every time I hear that deep voice of him...
they were, what was that? That was originally, it was Rankin Bass and then Ralph Bakshi.
Ralph Bakshi did the Lord of the Rings one, and that was the other one.
Were they claymation looking?
No, it was more their signature animation style, and then when Bakshi came in, it was rotoscope, so it was actors drawn over.
I want to see those.
They're pretty really good. The Hobbit one is a nice condensing of the book since it's only an hour.
Gollum here.
No, I'm all set.
No.
He got the nomination for adapted screenplay because allegedly, I don't know if this is true, but he gave the novel to his secretary and said, "Here, could you type this up in screenplay form?" and went on vacation. While he was on vacation, Jack Warner showed up at his office, found the document, read it, and went, "This is perfect," and greenlit the movie based on that.
Oh, wow.
Now, that said, there are some changes from the original book. One of the biggest ones is a whole chapter missing the Flitcraft story, this weird anecdote that Spade tells Bridget about, where he was working this missing persons case on a guy who had a near-death experience when a piece of construction equipment nearly killed him, and showed him the randomness of life and led him to just leave his wife and his family and, find a new life and go and find himself. And when Spade finds he's back in the same groove, he has a new wife, a new family, and has gone back to the same kind of sedate family existence he had before. It's a nice little metaphor for all these characters trying to find the Falcon and find this new thing and get caught in these same self-destructive
It would almost play well as a story at the end.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Because you said he told it to Bridget, or he told it to...
I told it to Bridget midway through the movie.
Told it to Bridget would make... That would have played in really, really nicely when he was kind of giving her the get off to prison speech at the end of the movie there. That would have worked really well there, I think.
Yeah, this kind of self-defeating nature of what all these people are striving for.
Because like I was alluding to before, I think anywhere else in the movie, a backstory about any of these people, aside from the words they said, would have detracted from the way the puzzle played out. Mm-hmm. Because immediately you get any backstory, one person now has the upper hand, you're tied to one person more than the other. And the reason this works the way it does is you know them all on an even playing field. You're introduced to one person, you don't see them doing anything other than interacting with these people. So you don't really get to know, aside from little nods and little winks and little side plays here and there, exactly what they're capable of.
And most of the backstory we get from Bridget is probably complete horseshit. So
I think all of it's complete horseshit.
One other change is interesting. Wilmer just disappears from the room, during the final confrontation. In the book, he actually goes back to Gutman's hotel and is waiting for him and kills him.
Oh!
Which he is kind of a dangling plot thread when he just vanishes. We never really find out what happens.
Well, and that, I mean...
He seems like he could be a loose cannon.
Well, that seems like that would happen because Gutman was perfectly willing to throw him under the bus, and I take it out of any of those people, Wilmer is probably the only person in the mix that isn't cool about that. You almost have a layer of respect out of Gutman. You could see if Gutman had found out what Spade had done to him, there was probably a bit of a slow clap, well played, sir, as he's getting taken away to jail. Whereas, Wilmer's, fuck that, and he's just going to go and kill somebody.
Well, it's nice that when the cops come in, Spade immediately goes, I bet Gutman told you an interesting story. He knows immediately that Gutman would do the same thing and try and throw him under the bus.
And that's very interesting, is and I'm sure you caught that too, Sarah, it's a really interesting thing. He was full and ready for them to try to arrest him too.
Yep.
So, and I bet you had he not, he would have kept that $1,000. But it's like, you know what? This is my ticket out of here.
He's certainly gone to enough trouble. I think he earned $1,000. Why not?
I like how he used it as evidence.
As evidence, yep.
But it's another little trait of Gutman's that kind of puts him on an even keel with Spade, that they're both ruthless enough to sell out their supposed loved ones.
And I find it quite ironic too. Even though at the end of the day the Falcon is useless, this useless piece of thing that people were killing each other over, when we truly find out that Spade's entire motivation here was just out of a pride in himself, morally, ethically, it doesn't matter that my partner was someone I didn't really like, and I disliked him so much that I could fool around with his wife on him and basically, take her away. But at the end of the day, he's my partner, goddammit. So it's funny that while everybody else's entire motivation was this stupid Falcon that ends up being a worthless piece of junk, and he ends up with it.
I think there's an interesting ambiguity for a lot of the movie where, even coming after we've seen it, we're not totally sure where Spade's interests lie. Because there's a couple scenes that hint that he is getting caught up in the hunt, too.
And maybe he is.
When they first find it, and he tears it open, we've got it, and grabs his Effie's hand, and she's like, "You're hurting me." He's getting a little too excited about it. And at the end, he mentions, if the bird had been real, well, that would have been one more item on the other side of the tally.
Yep.
But at the same time, there's that great moment when they finally get it, and everyone's like sweating and eager to open it, and Spade's just standing a little distance across the room, staring at them with this contemptuous little sneer on his face, like, "Look at you people, look at you, pathetic idiots."
Sarah, you caught the way the movie paced that scene when they first start digging into it. It's more and more and more about the subtle ways this movie is great and how it sets up the whole puzzle. For a second there, as the audience, you're like, shit, has everyone been duped? Did someone else... When they're opening it up, you think, is the Falcon really in there? They go through a couple layers, and they really make you wait till you get
to it. We didn't see what Spade did. Could he have taken it out and hit it somewhere?
Well, they actually make you think that it's not there. I don't know if that was on purpose or not, but you're watching it, and all the characters' reactions are like, it's nothing. It's
there's like another layer and another layer.
It's like the end of Return of the King.
Which is interesting, because when they show Humphrey Bogart opening it to see what it is, he didn't look like he went through that many layers.
Yeah, it looked like he just kind of ripped open a corner of it.
Yeah, which made me confused. And if it was all fluff and paper, why the hell was it so heavy?
Well,
it's still it's
metal.
A solid metal.
It's
it was
like
just
solid. They say it's solid lead.
Lead, yeah.
But it's interesting when they get it at the office. They immediately get the phone call from Bridget, supposedly in danger. What does he do though? He doesn't run right to her aid. First, he stops to mail, put it in the box and have the ticket mailed to himself. So even though he's out to help her, he's still looking out for himself first and thinking, I want to put this aside first. And speaking of the bird, which is the Falcon itself, is kind of the ultimate movie MacGuffin. The thing that doesn't really matter except that it drives the plot.
And it's the title.
Yeah, the history of the Falcon given at the beginning of the movie is completely made up. None of that is true, although it might have been inspired by the Nippenhausen hawk, this cup made for account of the Holy Roman Empire. Which
was there really a real Maltese Falcon?
No.
Oh.
There's this cup.
So the backstory is made up in the item itself.
Oh, yeah. It's completely. There are rumors of something like it, but it is totally made up for the story. The statue was created by an artist named Fred Sexton. There were several made of metal and resin for lighter ones so that they could carry around with them. One of which sold at auction for $4 million. So Gutman was actually right. Eventually, it was worth a lot of money. It took about 60 years or so. Another interesting little detail, did you notice that Archer's murder at the beginning of the movie is the only scene Spade is not in?
That's a very good point.
The original book is a first-person narrative, and as an adaptation, it's a really brilliant way to do it. And even that scene wasn't in the original screenplay. The studio supposedly insisted it be filmed, so we wouldn't have known of Archer's death until Spade picks up the phone and hears about it.
And I think it was actually, as much as it can be annoying with movies that have a narrative, the movie didn't start with him saying, and I'm going to tell you this tale, so it was a little easier to have that one scene be out of place. And I think had we not had it, you'd end up in a scene where he's getting told the deaths of two different people so quickly that it might confuse the audience, right? Because it's back to back. We see him die, and then the phone call the next day is that I keep messing up his name. Thursby is dead, and maybe you would have got that jumble. It's like, wait a minute, which one's Archer, which one's Thursby? We're so early in the movie, and there's so much information being given to us that it's important that you get those key bits.
Yeah, we see the crime scene, but we might have actually had to see Archer get shot, too. That is kind of important.
I mean, and going back to what you were saying about Humphrey Bogart's character not really liking his partner, he wasn't even cold, and he's having his desk removed in his name.
Yes, and that was awesome extra layering, right? Because you go, well, shit, maybe Spade at this point, we don't know as an audience at that moment in time. Maybe Bridget and Spade have some backstory thing we don't know about yet, and there's going to be a big playoff at the end where they're just doing this all to get the Falcon and run away with it.
And there's that little dig Paul House makes, like, he had his faults, but I'm sure he had some good points too. And Spade's just like, yeah, I suppose he did. The other thing I was going to say is interesting that, movies always show, don't tell, and yet this movie has a lot of scenes that are just characters telling what happened off screen we didn't see, but given the way it's structured, it has to be that way, because those scenes are important that we don't really know what happened, and we're only getting it from characters who aren't entirely reliable. Like what happened to Jacoby and, the meeting at the Paloma, we never see any of that, we just hear about it from Gutman. So at first we have to be like, can we trust what he's saying? Is all this actually true or not?
Someone should make a what really happened version.
Well, a lot of it is still kind of, there's some question marks on a few little plot elements, but the other important thing about this movie is this is kind of one of the big starting points for film noir.
Yes.
You can see so many of the elements of film noir starting right here. The element of crime in the story, the shadowy photography, you have a great cynical hero and the femme fatale. But one of the big things for me is that I think is important in noir is this interplay of romanticism and kind of harsh, grim reality. That you see it in Spade, that he loves this really horrific woman, but at the end he still has to lose her and chooses to lose her. And the same for all the criminals who have this kind of
Shakespearean tragic hero would put into, we'll say, quote unquote, nowadays United States, United nowadays world is, that was a big play on in the noir.
Mm-hmm. And with the criminals even, they have this quixotic quest to get this item that I think is going to, solve all their problems and put them on easy street.
And going back to that exact point, it's amazing. You have a villain who, being where the movie gives us a villain character in Gutman, I won't call him the villain, but even the guy on the, epic quest, as soon as he's foiled, it's just, well, I guess another year of our time is only worth, what do you say, another 15% of the money or something like that. It's just like, wow, he really doesn't necessarily care to get this thing as much as the quest is exciting him.
There was almost a moment where I wondered if it was a relief. It's like, if the quest had been over, then what does he do?
What do I do with my time?
He looks as I get to keep going after this thing.
And all I am is stuck with Cairo, who I'm actually kind of creeped out by.
But
I think the small one is an amputee inside.
He probably would, or have somebody else do it for him. But yeah, there's this sense that, the adventure continues. I still have something to live for and keep going after. Absolutely. I mean, even to that line where the Falcon is the stuff that dreams are made of.
And exactly. And even with, you wonder with Gutman, the money obviously doesn't seem to be the driving force for him. The money is the driving force that he does to get people in on his game. Mm. It's almost like the chase is all he's really caring about.
Yeah, and he has that kind of collector vibe of, I need this thing. It's sort of useless to me. I can't sell it or anything, or I don't want to sell it, but I have to have it because I can't have it. That brings up the question, I have to wonder, does the Falcon even exist, the one that he wants? I mean, is it this kind of story that he heard and saw this one and just applied it to it? We never even really find out if the Russian general guy that he says had it actually does have it or not.
Right, and again, it's almost, like you said, with the MacGuffin, it's not really key to the point of the movie. You don't feel bested by the movie that you don't get to find out.
Right.
And that's the sign of a very, very well put together narrative, right? Is that at the end of the day, that's all it really is. This is just an impetus for these people to interact and to go on their quest and to get to the point that they do.
It's important for what it represents to them, not really for what it actually is.
Exactly.
It's kind of contrasted with Spade, where these people will keep chasing after this thing. They'll kill anybody they need to. They'll spend whatever they need to get it. And at the end, Spade is willing to give up this thing that he's kind of been after the whole movie, Bridget. That he realizes, I have to give this up. She's going to get me in trouble. She's always going to have this power over me if I don't send her down the river. I think that's kind of what makes him the hero in this movie, is that he's willing to back away and go, I'm going to give this up. A couple other interesting points. I do love how they have to perform phone conversations in older movies. We don't have the voiceover from the other end, so Bogart's constantly like, hello? What? Miles Archer dead? In some, but I mean, he has to recite the plot point, which would make no sense in the conversation. Hi, Miles Archer's dead. Miles Archer dead?
Yeah, that's a very good point. I mean, and like Sarah just alluded to, we get them when it's important. We hear her scream. We don't really hear anything else she says.
No.
But you do get that voiceover.
Pretty much. And
I think she's in trouble.
And just male or female.
Yeah, sorry, it was his Effie. You think she's in trouble? Really? You heard her scream. She basically set him in the castle of I
have to wonder, Bridget playing on the other side. All right, how far should I go with this performance? Should I? Yeah, I'll go for the full scream. Yeah. Also,
never go full scream, Tim.
Of course, the influence of this movie is huge. You were mentioning The Spanish Prisoner as another movie of characters trying to one-up each other.
The Usual Suspects.
The Usual Suspects is another big one.
Especially with the boat and the fire.
Yep. And Kaiser Soze is, in a way, kind of the MacGuffin in that one. This shadowy thing that we're never quite sure exists or not for a lot of the movie.
May or may not be the devil.
Mm-hmm.
The Devil Meets a Lady, or whatever we said.
Satan Met a Lady, yeah.
Yep, Satan Met a Lady.
One of the big ones more recently is looking at Brick. You can see tons, to the point of a couple of bits of actual dialogue. That great moment during when Spade is confronting Bridget, like, "Oh, now you are dangerous," is actually pulled verbatim in that movie.
And yeah, in Brick, like this, it's all, like you said, it's mostly dialogue and people telling you situations.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not wasted on the audience at all. I mean, if anything, it helps you get more into the narrative, because you as the audience or another character saying, who do I believe?
Yeah, trying to piece it together.
And you don't even know if you can believe Spade.
Nope.
Because Spade's only going off of what he's heard, and you don't know enough about his backstory that maybe he was also chasing for the Falcon, and maybe it's not by mistake that she ends up in his office. We don't know any of that going into this movie. We're dropped into a piece in time instead of a nicely put together opening to a story. We're just kind of dropped in.
Yeah, we have to evaluate the characters based on how they act and what they do. We're not given this is the good guy.
Which Casablanca had going for it too.
Mm-hmm.
We're just, these people arriving, people leaving. It doesn't matter what was happening to them before. All you're getting is why they're here now and where they have to go and who they have to talk to.
And same there. I mean, at first examination, Bogart would seem like he's kind of a prick in that movie too. Here he's very ruthless. He's nasty to the ladies a lot of times, but still charming. So
yeah, I mean, I wrote it down here because it's one of my favorite lines for the movie. But one of the original scenes where Bridget first comes back, where we find out later the only reason she came back is because she realized, oh shit, my plan didn't work. Gutman's here and he's killed the guy I've been trying to kill myself the whole time. I'm screwed. I got to go back to this guy I've been trying to play the whole time and try to play him some more. And the first thing he says to her is, "How much money do you have?" And she tells him, "Yeah, give it to me." And it's just like, without even skipping a beat, just give it to me. I want all of it.
That scene shows how smart she's not. Because if she was smart, she wouldn't have said the whole amount.
Well, we're assuming she actually said the whole amount.
That is true.
That is true.
But also you can see there she's playing, the hapless victim. I need your help later on after the meeting with Joel Cairo. She's kind of playing the flirty, trying to ingratiate herself with him, seduce him in that moment. She keeps changing with, each particular moment. She's like Spade, improvising and changing her game plan as she needs to.
Which is eventually her downfall with Spade.
Yep.
He read right through it.
Another really great subtle touch with the costuming and set design. If you notice, when he visits her in the hotel room, she's wearing a bathrobe with stripes on it, almost like prison stripes, and the chairs have stripes. She's outlined by the blinds in one scene, and the last scene as she gets in the elevator,
it's through bars.
Closes and it's bars. There's always the symbolism of she's going to prison.
Another thing,
foreshadowing.
especially not being as used to, these aren't movies in our everyday life, so the lines that a guy might say. He goes, "What kind of man goes down a dark alley with his coat not buttoned up," and things. We don't recognize that as necessarily something that would be bad, but if you have a weapon to protect you, or just in general, we see it right in this movie that Spade uses it. Spade's always neatly buttoned up. He's always dressed to the nines. And was it Wilmer walking down the hall with him? You just see that casual, and the movie is obviously putting it in the forefront. The Wilmer, his coat's unbuttoned, it's kind of puffed up. He's got his hands in his pockets because obviously his hands are on his guns.
He's always thinking about his guns, yeah.
And Spade just kind of casually steps a couple steps back, slows down a bit, and just completely hockey shirts him with his coat and pulls the guns on him. And little subtleties like that, you're really working with a director that knows, and cinematographer and actors that just, that doesn't come by mistake. That's a very, very well set up, very cleverly put together sequence, and especially being so detached from people dressing like that in nowadays cinema, you might not recognize it until after it happens.
Well, also when they're trying to arrest Joel and Spade, and the guy tells them, "Get your hats." And I like look dapper while we arrest you.
You're going to look dapper while you arrest you, but also it's
today's make sure you're wearing clean underwear.
Right, and you got to make sure you wear clean underwear, and for God's sakes, put some clothes on your wife. No, but the way that comes off is, I could say it to somebody, make sure you leave with your coat and hat, but with them it comes off as like a forceful, this is how we have power over you. Please put on your hat. We're formally saying to you, we're fucking arresting you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's just so different. And noir, is full of that. Even nowadays, like you said with Brick, they keep that old-fashioned dialogue, even though it's high school students wandering around. But the big bad villain or drug lord, and that he's a kid living in his parents' basement, but he's got the top hat and the cane, and that comes right from movies like this.
Or if you look at Inception, where the clothing is a very film noir style with the vests and suit coats, and everyone's immaculately dressed.
And sort of one tiny little tangent. I know that Tim, I don't believe you've seen it, but the television show Hannibal is all film noir. They intentionally make it seem like it could be existing in multiple time periods. Like, characters might have cell phones and things, but they play it off. The handguns are always, 6 shooters, and
Nice.
all the characters are wearing fedoras, and it's just
Hannibal's always dressed to the nines.
Hannibal's always dressed to the nines, and it almost could be filmed in black and white, even though the color is so vivid. All of that, can harken back right to a movie like this. You can even see all of that just bleed over, Not, no
so
pun
missed
intended.
that level of style that they had.
You gotta see this show.
Let's bring that back. Dresses and suits.
Absolutely. Well, the hipsters have kind of ruined fedoras for a little while, but
That is true.
well, the short-brimmed ones.
And they don't even realize it yet.
They will pay someday.
Dresses are better than shorter than your vagina.
And we went there, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh, didn't take too long. I guess that about wraps up. Unless you guys have any other more thoughts about the movie.
I think I'm good.
I think I'm good too. I mean, I could end it with just saying, we'll be writing up front. This is the very first podcast I've ever been a part of, Sarah.
Me too.
And we hope to be part of more of these in the future, and hope you guys enjoyed listening to us.
Thanks.
Yes.
Thanks for
And
watching.
see the
movie.
Maltese
Hope you like
Falcon. It rocks.
Yes, and if you haven't seen it yet, why the fuck are you listening to this?
Put on your hat.
Yeah, that's, I think, good words to end by. So thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you next time.